Good afternoon and welcome to another inReach Field Experience webinar. Today we're going to be answering all of your questions about inReach. We'll get started with a little introduction. My name is Chip Noble. I'm a product manager here at Garmin. As you can see from this photo of a past hike that I did with my daughter on Bald Mountain in Maine, I'm an avid outdoorsman, and today I will be the answerer of all questions inReach. Let's jump right in and talk through the questions, most common questions that we receive here at Garmin from all of our users, like folks who have called in. So first question, what are the key differences between the inReach models? When we receive that question, I actually like to start by talking about the similarities between the devices. And you see here, all of our inReach devices have the same inReach technology, the same capabilities. They all use the Iridium satellite network for sending and receiving messages. And the unique thing about the Iridium satellite network is that has 100% global coverage, and it allows you to not only send a message, but to receive a reply. That's great for things like message delivery confirmation, so that you know that a message has successfully gone out. It also is really powerful because it allows friends and family, possibly search and rescue, to respond to you. The system also allows you to track your location. By default, the devices send your location once every 10 minutes when you're in tracking mode, and that goes out to a MapShare page. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit, but that's how friends and family follow along. Should you get into a situation where you have to declare an emergency, that same ability to send and receive messages and track your location can be used to communicate with the Garmin IERCC, that is the International Emergency Response Coordination Center. And then they can receive your message, and then a real person will reply and ask for details. What's the nature of your emergency? Is it medical? Is it equipment failure? We're going to have a slide a little bit later to talk more about SOS as well. Some other things that you can do with any of our inReach devices: you can request a weather forecast, you can navigate to a waypoint or along a route. The devices all pair with a companion app that we have two different companion apps, the Earthmate app and the Explore app. And those work on your smartphone connected to your device for a different user interface, different mechanism to read updates and input data. And there is also a Garmin Explore website that is part of all of our inReach devices, where you can do things like configure your device or plan your activities. So a bunch of similarities with between all the devices. You see the note at the bottom. Definitely want everyone to remember. I know most of our listeners are already inReach users, but an active satellite subscription is required for the device. We'll look at data plans a little bit later. And then to also remember that there are some parts of the world, some countries, that don't allow satellite communication devices. So it is the responsibility of all of you as inReach users to make sure that you look ahead of time when you go off for your bucket list trip and make sure that satellite communication devices are allowed. So having talked about the similarities, let's look at the different models. And you see here, this is our inReach model lineup, and it runs a range from, on the left, our inReach Mini. That is our lightest, our smallest device at 3.5 ounces, a great device for trail running and mountain biking and those go light backpacking activities. And it goes all the way up to the Montana 700i and 750i. That is our largest device. That has a touchscreen, has a large display. It's great for activities like ATV travel or snow machines or off-road vehicles. And then in the middle, we have more of a traditional handheld device with satellite communication capabilities. The inReach Explorer Plus has topographic maps and a very long battery life. Not as many of the handheld GPS features. That is more in line with a GPS Map 66i or a GPS Map 86i. That's where Garmin's flagship handheld device has been married with our inReach satellite communication capabilities to really give you the best that Garmin has to offer. That has SD cards for for custom map options. It has the ability to calculate a route. It has navigation capabilities, all of the extra features like a sun moon page, the ability to average a waypoint, the ability to do a search of the map data, that sort of thing. And then the device in the middle, towards the middle, the Alpha 200i, that is actually one of our dog track and train devices that allows you to connect a collar for your dog so that you can see your dog's location while they're out with you, either hunting or hiking with your dog, that sort of thing, but still offers that same inReach capability for messaging, tracking, and SOS. So a very exciting lineup. This is actually one of my favorite slides because it shows how far we've come with inReach, with Garmin, with the ability to marry satellite communication with many of the different Garmin handheld GPS devices. So this is a table that's available on our support site. I'm not going to dive too deeply into this. It's a resource for you to go and look through later, but really what it shows is as you move from left to right, we add in some additional features. You see things like preloaded topo maps, sensors, a compass, a barometric altimeter, the devices that I mentioned that have that automatic routing. That's a very handy feature on the 66i, the Montana 700i. You see the ability for SD cards. The Montana has a camera. The thing to draw attention, I would say here, and we do have a slide with even more detail, but the bottom part of this chart does show you battery life. There is a difference between devices that are more like the satellite, the tracking and satellite communication focused devices with the inReach Mini, the inReach Explorer Plus, as it compares to the traditional handheld GPS devices that have a continuous GPS update and also has some of that navigation capabilities. You see those battery lives, 35 hours, 18 hours. But the nice thing is that all of these devices have a feature we refer to as expedition mode or extended tracking mode, and that allows you to reduce the send interval of your tracking message and really focus in on best battery. And so that's when you see things like the 200-hour battery life on the 66i, which is great for someone going out for a long weekend. You can even achieve weeks worth of battery life in the inReach Mini. Really nice for people, going after some of the national scenic trails, the Appalachian Trail, the Long Trail, that sort of thing. So keep an eye on the battery life. Look at the other features in the table. Again, this is available on our website. From here, we talked about the device, and then we also get a lot of questions about what are the differences between the Garmin Explore and Earthmate apps. These are the two companion apps for our device. Like we did with the device section, let's talk first about the similarities, because what I really want to reassure people is while the Earthmate app is the app that you would use with our older devices, and the Explore app is the app we use with our newer devices, they all really deliver the same core functionality. They are the companion apps for the devices. They can be installed on your smartphone, whether you have an Android phone or an Apple phone, and they allow you to control the inReach functionality. So think of it as a remote control for your device. For myself, I will clip the inReach Mini, even the GPS Map 60 series, I'll clip it to my backpack so that it has a real clear view of the sky. And then I use my phone for my input. That allows me to do things like send and receive messages, start and stop tracking. I can get weather forecasts, and I can declare an SOS from the app if I need to. Both devices allow you to download additional maps. That's the topographic maps. You can cache those maps on the device so you don't have to have cell phone coverage or Wi-Fi coverage. You bring them with you into the backcountry. That covers or includes the topographic maps. It includes public land maps, as you see listed here. Aerial imagery, one of my favorites for when I'm above tree line. You can actually see the trails in the aerial imagery. Also the USGS quad sheets, which I really enjoy because they have the building footprints, the dwellings on them. Both apps are also used for syncing waypoints, routes, tracks, that sort of thing from the device to the app to the website. So these are the similarities between the two apps and really showing the core functionality the same for both. There are some differences, and we'll just pull up both at the same time, the Garmin Explore app and the Earthmate app. And really you see in that first bullet, it's all about which device is compatible with which app. And that's because the Earthmate app is the app that we had back in the DeLorme days. That's the app that works with the inReach for smartphones, the inReach Explorer, the inReach SE. It's also the app when Garmin first acquired DeLorme, we released the inReach Explorer Plus and the SE Plus, followed that with the inReach Mini. Those use a Bluetooth protocol that works with the Earthmate app. Shortly after those devices were released, we started working on new projects, and we created the Explore app. And the unique thing about the Explore app is that it is also compatible with Garmin wearable devices, not necessarily just the inReach enabled devices. So the Explore app works with things like the Phoenix and the Instinct, and it came around, we released it at the same time that we released the GPS Map 66i, the GPS Map 60 series. So the GPS Map 66i, the 86i, and you see the 86SCI, which just means it has sensors. The Montana series, the Alpha series, those all work with the Explore app. Now there are some differences for people who are interested. The differences include things like, as I mentioned, the ability to pair with a Garmin wearable, but also you can do some more advanced features, some more advanced things with the Explore app, like creating multi-point routes. You can tap out a route from your start point to your destination. You can create collections with the Explore app. That's really handy because it allows you to take the waypoints and the routes for your trip, group them together, and then use that to quickly change the visible state. So you could turn off everything except your special trip up Mount Katahdin, and then that allows you to focus in on the important data for that activity. There are also some advanced things like the ability to view an elevation graph. So for folks who really are interested in that kind of higher end planning and that sort of thing, you may consider an upgrade path from your older inReach for smartphones into something like a GPS Map 60 series, gain access to the Explore app. But otherwise, we don't want people to worry that the core functionality is different, as you saw in that first slide, very much the same. So key differences between the Explore and Earthmate apps right there. From there, we talk about the device, we talk about the app. A lot of times we get questions about our data plans. How do the inReach plans work? So to take a look at that, as I mentioned during that notice in the first slide with the red text there, an active satellite subscription is required to take advantage of the Iridium capabilities. That is the messaging, tracking, weather, and safety. There are two types of plans. We have our personal plans. This is what our consumers use. Those are designed for individuals, and usually those individuals have one inReach device. There are two different flavors of plans there. There's a freedom plan, which allows you to commit to a month at a time. So this is a great plan for people who are interested in seasonal use. Say you're a backcountry skier, or you're a sailor, or you're someone who only needs it for a few months out of the year. After your season is over, you can suspend the device. Then you don't pay for the months where you're not using it. For folks who, like myself, who have year-round activities, whether it's in the ski season or the hiking season, consider the annual plans, and there is a lower monthly cost with those plans. We also have professional plans for any professional users listening to the webinar today, and those are our professional flex plans. Those are designed for larger organizations, for groups of multiple users where there are a lot of devices that are being managed. Again, a deal for organizations and teams. We'll look at the plans for those as well. So this is how our plan, how it looks if you go to our support or to our Garmin website. we show that for personal plans, we break things down not only by whether you are an annual plan user or if you've chosen that freedom option, but there are also different tiers of the plans ranging from a safety plan up through expedition. And if you look at it, you see that it just involves different levels of unlimited capabilities. So all of our plans have the unlimited SOS capabilities and unlimited presets. You can send as many preset messages as you want. That's a message with a specific message sent to a specific group of recipients. So friends and family that you've selected can receive one of 3 messages. And even in the safety plan, you can send as many as you want. When you move into the recreation plan, we add things like unlimited tracking. I encourage anyone that is, hiking or mountain biking, that sort of thing, and want people to be able to see their progress, get in at the recreation level because it gives you that unlimited tracking capability. And then the expedition plan is exciting because it has the unlimited messaging. The nice thing about our plans, and we'll look at this in a second, but you can move up and down between the plans and there is no penalty for that. That's really nice if you have a bucket list, a special bucket list trip coming up. You can move into the expedition plan for that trip. And then when the trip is over, you can drop back down, and the next billing cycle that comes around, you can move yourself back to, say, the recreation or the safety plan level. So some other details here in the slides talk about overages, talks about the cost difference between annual and freedom. Review this, and you can find it on the website as well. For our professional users, very similar plans there. You see the 1 monthly fee for monthly flex. And again, the real difference between the consumer and the professional plan is around how the Explore website works, and it actually has some additional features that are very valuable for administrators and organizations managing large groups of users, many devices. So that's the key difference. But certainly if you are in that category and you have a large number of people on your team, definitely want to check in with our professional sales team for help getting into a professional plan. Some specific questions around that. Can I have more than 1 inReach device and user on a personal plan account? You can only have 1 user. The multiple user scenario, we really want those people to get into the professional plan. But you can have more than 1 inReach device. You just can't have it active and assigned to the user at one time. So for an individual that has 2 devices, you have to swap the devices in and out. Again, really around catering to an individual user for consumer, and you can get into the multiple user, multiple device scenarios with the professional plans. Can I have multiple devices on 1 subscription? I think we've covered that. No is the answer. And can I transfer my subscription to a new inReach device? Yes, you can do that. If you upgrade from an inReach for smartphones into one of the newer devices, you certainly can transfer your subscription to that new device. Is there a cost to move up and down in a plan? And I mentioned this already. When we first came out with our plans, there was a cost, and we realized that we wanted to encourage people to use the devices as much as they wanted, and so we removed that cost to move up and down. Now we encourage you, if you have that bucket list trip, move up into the expedition plan for the month, take advantage of unlimited messaging, then move back down when you're finished and you want to go back to, say, a safety plan or a recreation plan. Last question, can I let a friend or family member borrow my device? The answer is yes, you certainly can. Some things to note, the settings for the device show who the messages are coming from. So you would want to go in and either change the display name before you lend the device to them, to their name, or just remind them that any messages that get sent might have the device owner's name as showing that that's who the message was coming from. Relatively easy to explain to people, but something to keep in mind. And also not difficult to change the display name. But yes, you can let other people, friends, family members borrow your device. So devices, companion apps, subscriptions, and this next question is another popular one, to the point where we actually have an SOS webinar that we do each year. Very, very well attended. Lots of great questions come out of that. But what happens when you trigger an SOS? So we've taken the high level pieces of that and brought it here for folks. What happens? Well, here are some of the benefits, why you use an inReach for that SOS capability. And our SOS incidents, they're all managed through the Garmin IERCC. I mentioned the International Emergency Response Coordination Center. The nice thing about that is you're not relying on a friend or a family member to be awake when you have an emergency and receive your message. This is a 24/7 staffed professional emergency response coordination center. That is a great reassurance that there is someone whose job is to be there just in case you need them. And we talked about the capabilities of the device, the ability to use the Iridium satellite network to send and receive messages. Well, you can do that messaging with the Garmin IERCC. So it's two-way messaging, and that allows them to receive your message and reply. They'll send a reply. What's the nature of your emergency? Is it a medical emergency? Is it an equipment failure? And then you're chatting with them right there, wherever you are in the world. I mentioned the coverage through Iridium. It also has the ability to use tracking. So while we always encourage people to be stationary, to stay where you are when you have an emergency, there are situations, perhaps you're in a boat, perhaps there's a reason that you need to move. They will see your location update every 10 minutes during your emergency. Another nice feature that we mentioned is there is actually the ability to cancel the emergency. And that's a great feature, because then the Garmin IERCC has the ability to acknowledge that you've canceled, and then they can reach out to search and rescue and stop them from traveling further into harm's way because you have resolved the situation. The note here really is just to make sure everyone remembers that while the IERCC might send a message to you to ask for details, you don't have to respond to that message. You might have a situation where you can't respond. It doesn't change whether or not they're going to send help. It just provides additional detail. When we have our SOS webinar, we talk with Emily Thompson from the IERCC, and she points out that really the purpose of inReach is to provide as much information as possible to the search and rescue organization, to the boots on the ground that are coming to help you. If they know that it's a medical emergency, they may bring different equipment with them. If they know that it's a vehicle issue, that also is informative. So it's all about sharing as much information as you can with the team. So this is what happens when you trigger, the benefits of using inReach, and this is what happens, the actual steps when you trigger. So you see the first thing that happens is you, as a user, you open the SOS door and you press and hold that SOS button, and you hold it down until you see the countdown timer. That's the only thing you're looking for. Press and hold. When you see the countdown timer, you have 20 seconds, you release the button. After 20 seconds, it automatically sends a message to the IERCC. Once the IERCC receives that message, they will respond. A real person will receive the message, and they will send you a reply asking, again, is it medical emergency or an equipment failure, something like that. At the same time that they're interacting with you, they're also reaching out to emergency services at your location. So they have this huge database of local area search and rescue all around the world, and they will reach out while they're interacting with you. They will reach out and say, we have an emergency. They provide details there. They will update you, the person in the field with the emergency, based on what they hear back from local area search and rescue. They will also, while this is happening, they will reach out to your emergency contacts to see if they can learn anything more about the situation. Perhaps you planned your adventure and you shared your plan with your emergency contacts. They may be able to get additional details from your emergency contacts. Again, all part of providing as much information as possible to local area search and rescue to help with the situation that you're in. So they're really doing a bunch of things all at the same time. They're interacting with you, the inReach user. They're interacting with local area search and rescue. They're interacting with your emergency contacts. All of this detail gets kind of organized and shared back with you when you're in the field. At the same time, you can actually use your inReach device to communicate with your friends and family. So it doesn't all have to go just through the IERCC. The device is capable of sending a custom message to friends and family. You may want to deliver some additional details to them. Hey, there's a situation. This is what's happening. I'm getting assistance, that sort of thing. And as I mentioned, the IERCC really, they stay in contact. They coordinate all of this between you as the user and the local area search and rescue. And that last note, once you've either received assistance or the situation has changed and you no longer need assistance, you can cancel your SOS, and the IERCC at that point will close the incident. So we often get additional questions about SOS. When can I trigger an SOS? This is a good question. We hear this a lot. Sometimes people are nervous about using the SOS feature. We say to use your best judgment when you consider triggering an SOS. There isn't really a one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter example of when to use it. One thing, and I apologize because I can't recall, but I in my studies of emergency response and that sort of thing, there was a presentation where they referred to when you reach a situation where you're no longer sure of the outcome, that is an appropriate time to declare the emergency. And if you think about it, if you up until then, you may know that you're going to overnight because the weather, you have to set up a shelter and take shelter. That's okay. I don't believe you need to declare an emergency. You're still in control. You understand the outcome of the situation. It's when something changes and you're no longer sure of what the outcome is going to be. That's a good time to reach out to search and rescue. I reach out to the Garmin IERCC, let them know the details of your situation. They have the ability to choose. They'll contact local search and rescue, and local search and rescue has the ability to choose whether they send support right away, or perhaps they realize that it's dark and they can't deliver a rescue right away. But then you are in contact through the Garmin IERCC with local area search and rescue, and information is being transferred back and forth. And that is the right time, is when you're unsure of the outcome of the situation. They can get involved. They can start providing assistance. An important note here is we certainly tell people you want to make sure you're recreating responsibly, and you're being mindful that the situation that you are facing would be the same situation that search and rescue would have to encounter if they came to your assistance. So we talk about turning around as soon as you realize that the weather has changed, or some part of the situation is changing. You're not going to necessarily be able to make it to your destination. Don't force it at that point. Those are the right times to turn around and go back. So just think about that as you consider how you're using your SOS device. Don't allow that knowledge that you have an SOS device to allow you to overextend yourself, and just recreate responsibly. We hear people ask, who rescues me? This is an important detail. While you're in communication with the Garmin IERCC, they're not actually the organization that rescues you. They reach out to local area search and rescue using their global database. So that's where that group working together, they determine the most appropriate emergency service. And so it might be a helicopter if it's a medical emergency that needs urgent response. It might be boots on the ground in terms of a group of volunteers that come in to render assistance. The detail there, though, is that it's that local area search and rescue, the first responder, that is the group that determines the best way to conduct the rescue. It's not actually the IERCC. They are the dispatch that works between you as the inReach user and local area search and rescue. We receive a question oftentimes, what does rescue cost? And this is a challenging question, and really the answer is that it varies depending on where you are. If it's an international rescue, it varies from if it's a rescue here in the US. It varies by state, it even can vary by county. And so we are careful to make sure that we point out that if you're concerned about whether there will be a cost, you need to reach out and check with the local search and rescue in the place where you're going to be traveling. So with your bucket list trip, check for that ahead of time. And that then you can learn what the applicable laws and regulations are based on your activity. And as I mentioned, check with local area authorities for that. Can I trigger an SOS for another person or an event? We get this question quite a bit as well. And yes, you can trigger an SOS for yourself, certainly, if you have an emergency, for someone in your party. You can also declare an emergency for someone that isn't in your party. Perhaps you came across someone with an injury, and you're certainly encouraged to use it for that. And there are even some scenarios that don't involve people. Maybe you see smoke from a forest fire. That is an excellent example of a time to use the SOS feature. You can, if someone is borrowing your device, they certainly can use it to trigger an SOS. That is the purpose of the device. So if someone's borrowing it, yes. Now, if there are any fees that are incurred during the use of the device, those fees go to the person for whom aid was needed. So the person you declared the SOS for would be responsible for that. We have a note that certainly we like to share, because sometimes the person who needs assistance is the device owner. So if you go on a trip, you want to make sure that first, your group knows that you have an inReach device. And second, make sure that they know how to use the device, just in case you are unable to use it yourself. You don't want there to be any confusion. Relatively straightforward. You open the SOS door, you press and hold until you see the SOS countdown timer appear. That's the extent of the steps that you need to follow, but you want to make sure anybody that might not be familiar with inReach knows, again, about opening that door and pressing the button. How can I preserve battery life on my inReach device? This is another great question. And so we have a little table here, and it shows you that by default, with 10-minute tracking, the inReach Mini at 90 hours through the Montana at 18. There's the range. But we have this feature called expedition mode or extended tracking mode, depending on your device. And when you use that, it does things like turn off some of the features you see listed there. It turns off high detail logging in the backlight, turns off your Bluetooth connection to your phone, some different things. It allows you to get a better battery life. And then certainly if you switch to the 30-minute tracking, you can see a considerable increase in battery life. The inReach Mini at 24 days, the inReach Explorer Plus at 30 days. Those are great battery life values. Even the GPS Map 66 and 700, Montana 700, you get 8 days and 12 days. So that's how you really extend your battery life. It's using expedition mode. And you can see even a 30-minute tracking interval is still pretty good if you're traveling on foot and that sort of thing. So expedition mode is the best way to extend battery. Some additional details. A lot of people ask about cold weather. All electronics are impacted by cold weather. Their battery performance declines. So the key here is to keep the device close to your body, keep it warm. On the other side of things, with hot weather, high temperatures, in the summertime here, don't leave the device on your dash. If it overheats, it won't be able to charge. We restrict charging so it doesn't damage the battery. This is an important tip for folks who are going out for long periods of time. The system does work with solar chargers or portable battery banks. And the note there, some people ask, well, what kind of a solar charger do I need? It needs to provide a 5-volt charging capacity. And really what that means is if it has any kind of a USB output, that's pretty standard that it's 5 volts with a USB output. Some additional specs around temperature. These are your operating temperature ranges, -4 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the charging range is a little narrower, but 32 to 104. And then the last note is for any electronics, really, you want to store your device at 80% charge. It's just the best battery level for maintaining the length of your battery. And then you can charge it up to 100% before you go. Jumping quick to the MapShare section, what is MapShare? We've found that a lot of our users aren't either unaware or they're not using MapShare. So we want to definitely talk about this. What is MapShare? Well, MapShare is the web page where your tracking data and any messages that you specifically send to MapShare go. So think of it as the place where friends and family can follow along. You turn on your MapShare page and you send your MapShare link out to friends and family. That allows them to follow along during your adventure. You can also send a message, and you can even address that message specifically to MapShare, and you could use it as a journal. So you're hiking the Appalachian Trail, and when you come to places where you're going to spend the night, you can put a little note that says, spending the night here, or scenic overlook lunch spot here. And those messages will become little message bubbles on your MapShare, and it's kind of like having a map-based journal, so that when friends and family go to, say, your Facebook page and they see your MapShare link and they tap on it, it comes up with the map and a breadcrumb trail and all these little messages you sent to MapShare so that they can read about how your trip went. Very cool feature that we have. There are some controls for it. You have to turn it on or enable it or disable it in the social tab of your Explore website. There are settings so that you can do things like create a password if you want to restrict who can see it. You can set controls so that people have the option to send you a message from MapShare. They may be able to ping your location. They can see all of your tracking data. All of this can be controlled in the settings. And then you can share your link, as I mentioned, take that link and send it to friends and family. You can either do it through email before you go on your trip, or you can actually send your MapShare link from your inReach device from the field. I do this a lot if I'm about to start the trip. I'll send them a MapShare link as a reminder, and then a message saying, hey, I'm starting my hike. And that's a reminder for people. They may want to tune in because I'm starting my special activity. It's important to remember that MapShare is the only way that people you haven't initiated the conversation with. It's the only way for people who you haven't already sent a message. That's how they start a conversation with you. So you can post your MapShare link to Facebook, and people who see it can start a message thread with you. Where are satellite communication devices prohibited? This question, I alluded to it in the beginning. This is a question we hear quite a bit. And as I mentioned, some countries prohibit the use of satellite communication devices. There are also some countries, the United States has embargoes prohibiting satellite communication. These are important details, and it's the responsibility of the user to know about the laws for the places where they'll be traveling. So where your bucket list trip is, make sure you know what the regulations are around satellite communication. We don't want anyone to get in trouble when they're traveling. There are additional details on our Garmin support site, and then the US State Department also has a list of these embargoed countries and the foreign embassies and consulates where you can get more information. We don't provide the information here because it does change from time to time, and so your best course of action is to do the research yourself. But definitely check into it if you're planning international travel. A lot of people ask, hey, can I see where these recordings of prior webinars are? And yes, you certainly can. We have webinars, like I mentioned, the SOS webinar, best practices webinar, tips and tricks for people to know all the cool little details. That is all available on in our recorded previous webinars, and you can see those if you go to our support site and you search for the device you're interested in, and then you'll see a little training webinar section, and you can watch and you can see the slide decks for this. And you can also see them on Garmin's YouTube channel if you go to YouTube and search for Garmin, and you can see the inReach webinar playlist. Last detail here before we open things up for questions. There are additional resources about the Garmin Explore website. I believe all of you are aware of that. I just talked about Garmin support. And the one that I think is most interesting is really the Garmin blog. That's where you can go to read about all of the latest inReach adventures, and you see SOS stories. These are people just like yourselves who are using inReach for really cool things, and sometimes they contact us and we write nice blog stories about their adventures. So check out the Garmin blog.